Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. So today I've got a one-of-a-kind custom order that I'm going to be working on. Okay, so I had a very nice family come into the farmer's market. It's been several weeks ago, and they like to play board games. And they have one board game in particular that they like to play, but it's very large. It is 70 by 127 centimeters. In American, that comes out to roughly 27.5 inches by 50 inches, which is almost the size of a regular dining room table. And their request is that I could build a smaller table that the game could sit on that would have little legs that would get it up off of the table about 3 inches so that they could put their game pieces underneath it and still have the board sitting up on top. So I started designing this, and the first thing that I thought of was, because it's so large, if I made it in one piece, it would be like building them a new table, and where would they store it whenever they weren't playing the game? So I pitched the idea of having a game board that folded in half. The little legs would fold out underneath it, and when it's not in use, they could potentially put their pieces inside of it as a storage container as well. So their request was that it had a flat top, of course, that it was a 1/2 inch bigger than the game board all the way around, and that it had cedar on it. So I'm going to build it basically with an insert and then have cedar trim around it and make it look real nice. Now, being completely transparent with you guys, I started this project several days ago, and I cut these strips of 3/4 inch plywood down to the lengths that I needed, and I started drilling the holes and the screws for the joinery, and it just wasn't working out. And I was getting very frustrated. Of course, it's hot as usual, but I was getting very frustrated. So I've learned throughout working with custom projects and just working in general is that when I get frustrated or whenever things just aren't going my way, instead of getting angry or throwing a fit, I just back off, reassess, maybe take a few days or whatever, a little bit of time away, just walk away from it, and then kind of re-energize and reassert myself towards that project. So I've got a new idea for the joinery. I think instead of trying to screw straight in, which was causing it to split, I'm going to use some pocket holes in the corners, and then the rest of it I can pre-drill and put screws in. But I'm going to get started on building the frames. There's going to be 2 frames that are identical. Then we're going to connect the 2 of those together with a hinge to make it close, put some latches on it. So, enjoy.
Huh. I just noticed I really need to fix that hole in the side of my shop because that light is a little distracting. The frame is made out of 3/4 inch birch plywood. Even using a pilot bit and countersinking the head, the screw still split the end of the plywood, which was really frustrating. And now that I think about it, pocket holes were a much better option to begin with. You see me checking this quite often for square, but this thing had to be pretty spot on in order to close later on. The face is made out of 1/2 inch paint grade plywood, which I choose my track saw to cut. And using my table saw and keeping the factory edge on the fence, I ripped it down to size. Then I glued the 1/2 inch plywood to the frame and shot it with a few brad nails to hold it. The legs were to be held on by 1/4 inch carriage head bolts, which you see countersunk in the corners. I added 3 plywood strips to give the top and the legs some support. sawdust and wood glue filler worked great, but became my first mistake. And while it dried, I milled cedar fence pickets to 1/2 inch thick and then ripped them to width on my table saw. And that first mistake was not thoroughly sanding the wood filler off. And those spots that it left, I painted with the wrong paint. I did not intend to paint this with gloss paint, and off camera I did sand this all down and recoat it with a flat paint. I added the cedar sides with miter corners with a liberal amount of wood glue. Did you see my second mistake? More on that later. This piano hinge will allow the two pieces to fold together, like that. And my second mistake was not adding the carriage bolts before I glued the sides on. Moron. And while thinking about a solution to that problem, I added a coat of polyurethane to the cedar. Sometimes solutions to problems work better than the original design, and these threaded T-nuts were exactly that.
Okay friends, here it is, all completed. Cedar and plywood game board table thingy. Anyways, cedar here, plywood here. It's got a dark walnut paint on it. A coat of polyurethane on the cedar part of it. 6 legs underneath it made out of plywood. I didn't think that it needed a 7th and 8th in the middle because of the piano hinge supporting the weight on these middle legs. It is nice and flat. I added felt on the bottom of each one of these legs just to prevent any kind of scratching on a tabletop that they set it on. Anyways, and I've got my little brass closure to hold it with. So all in all, it was a great project. It was quite a bit more challenging than I anticipated it being. Hence it took me a little bit longer to complete than I thought it would. But I wanted to make sure that I did a good job for them. So I'm gonna fold it up into its folded up station or briefcase style